Welcome to Suzanne's studio. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight we are going to meet Dr. Stanley Fischman, who is a highly regarded board-certified psychiatrist. Dr. Fischman is affiliated with El Camino Hospital, and El Camino Hospital is located in Mountain View, California. And I'm just so delighted to welcome you, Stan.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
We can talk about so many subjects, but this is the one that I hope that you'll respond to. And of course, being such a famous doctor, you can talk about anything. I get that in. However, so many people, so many of my friends have sleep disorders, and people really don't like to talk about sleep disorders, but I thought tonight would be the perfect time. How do you feel about that?
That's fine. I'm not a sleep expert, but I've learned a lot over the years and have been able to incorporate a lot of this into my practice, particularly as I evaluate patients with a variety of illnesses.
Like what?
Well, for example, a classic example for me has been, since I'm a child psychiatrist, I see a lot of children with attention deficit disorder. Well, as it turns out, and I've actually written some papers on this, about a third of patients, a quarter to a third of patients with attention deficit disorder actually have conditions involving sleep, particularly childhood sleep apnea, which often goes unrecognized even though the child has been experiencing this since early on in his or her lifetime.
Tell what sleep apnea is, please.
Obstructive sleep apnea is a condition that is secondary to not being able to get enough air into your lungs while you're sleeping. Your brain notices that the oxygen level is falling, and it wakes you up. You may not be fully awake, but you are partly awake, and you're not going into the period of sleep where our body really works hard at restoring us. Those are the deeper part of sleep, including dream sleep. And that's during that time where our whole body is so relaxed that it's very hard to get any oxygen in. The causes of the obstruction can be manyfold. They could be due to big tonsils. They can be due to, or tonsils and adenoids. They can be due to a large tongue that flops to the back of the throat. It could have a lot to do with the structure of your jaw, but it has to do with air not getting in through your nose and throat down into your lungs.
Would a child die from this necessarily?
They usually don't die from sleep apnea, but they don't get good rest. And so, for example, with attention deficit disorder, those children are really very tired. And so they have a lot of trouble paying attention in classroom. They're easily distracted, just like any of us who is very tired tries to study something. We're not going to do very well with it. And the same thing is true at work.
What can be done about that, Stan?
Well, it has to be evaluated. Firstly, if anybody suspects this, you need to get appropriate testing. And that testing is usually done while the child or the adult is asleep, and attached to all kinds of measuring devices that measure your flow of oxygen, that measures the blood oxygen, your breathing style, your sleep itself, because there are many stages to sleep. And we need to find out whether this is being disrupted.
Well, that's such a good explanation. But I notice a lot of people, including myself, thank God I don't have it that badly, I can go to sleep, but then I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep. That's called insomnia.
Well, it's a form of insomnia. Some people have trouble falling asleep at night just when they get into bed, and others don't.
You got to tell, what can we do about it?
Oh, there are many, many things to do about any kind of sleep disturbance.
Yeah.
If, for example, with the obstructive sleep apnea, if somebody is a child, for example, they need to be evaluated for what's causing the obstruction. Now, it may be due to obesity in some people, and to some degree, sleep apnea contributes to obesity, so it's a vicious cycle for some people. And so what we do, sometimes just losing 10 pounds may make all the difference in the world as far as obstructive sleep apnea is. If you're younger, if that doesn't work, then some people use a machine called a CPAP machine, which stands for continuous positive pressure. I forget what the rest of it is. And the CPAP machine, forces the air down your throat. Other people, if it's appropriate, they might need surgery to open up the back of the throat so that the patient, or the nasal passageway, so that the person can get enough oxygen while they're asleep. And it's a fascinating thing, and we're not sure entirely whether we have all the solutions to that yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We're much better now with this whole process.
What about the couple that just gets married and they didn't sleep together before they were married, and the bride, the woman, finds out her husband snores and she can't sleep at all? What do you do about that?
Well, firstly, he needs to be evaluated for sleep apnea, and likely he has something like that. And that can be usually treated very, very effectively under those circumstances.
How can that be treated?
Well, again, with CPAP or with surgery if need be, depending on the cause, the actual physical cause to this problem.
Yeah, but I wonder if people that snore, and I'm just saying men do, but I guess women do too, but what if they just don't admit it and they won't do anything about it?
Well, then they got to see somebody like me.
Yeah.
And get that worked out.
What would you do?
I would, we would discuss it, and
yeah.
I would try to teach him as much as I can about sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And then, then it's a choice, because she can either move to another bedroom or move to another world.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder why there's so many divorces. But why does it seem that men have more snoring problems than women?
I don't know the answer to that. Maybe somebody who's a student of sleep, intense student of sleep, could answer that. I don't know the answer to that. Usually,
if the man sleeps on his back, and you can move them to the side, I guess it changes the oxygen.
Yeah, it changes the ability to not block the back of the throat. So, for example, if his tongue was falling back against the back of his throat, it would fall more to the side that he went to.
Well, it sounds to me like everything has to do with sleep apnea.
Everything?
Is that true?
Well, a lot of disorders can occur, because some people who have sleep apnea can present with depression, some with severe anxiety disorders, and a lot of medical problems can occur too. Like, there seems to be an increased incidence, and it's probably because of the oxygen issue, incidence of heart attacks and sleep and strokes, secondary to some disturbance in sleep.
Well, let's talk about what we can do.
With sleep apnea,
with all of it.
All of it. Well, the first thing is a good evaluation by a sleep specialist.
Okay.
They have all the equipment and all the knowledge, and I just refer them to that sleep specialist. And it's interesting, but a lot of different fields have found that they have a role in the sleep apnea. There are people who are pulmonologists, that is, lung experts. There are people who are ear, nose, and throat people who do a lot of work in that area, and there are others in other specialties that bring to bear their knowledge.
And this is such a broad subject, of course, but will this help insomnia?
Well, insomnia, that is due to this, yes, but there are other things too that cause insomnia.
Tell about that.
Well, there are a lot of people who have insomnia because they have a disrupted sleep cycle. That is, they sleep in too much. They maybe stay up all night, playing. With teenagers, I see a lot of this, where they are playing games all night long, and these new video game things, relatively new video game things, where people are in contact all over the world, and they're up all night long doing this. They can't even get to school, some of these kids. And the same thing is true if you're the kind of person who works late at night and things like that. Now, in those instances, medicines don't work that well. That's very interesting. A lot of people think, oh, the answer is an antihistamine or a Valium-like medication or something like that.
There's that other fabulous one that gets people hooked.
Ambien?
Starts with an Ambien.
Ambien. It could get them hooked, and of course the Valium-like medications they're called benzodiazepines, can get people hooked. And sometimes we have to use it for a short time if people are very anxious. We use those for just a short time, but it's really best not to become dependent on it, which is what happens. They don't get hooked in the usual heroin style, but they get hooked in terms of dependency.
Right. So, and you were talking, it used to be for me that I couldn't go to sleep unless I watched television. I don't do that anymore, and that's so stimulating. So, but it worked. It was so boring, except for our shows here at KMVT. Yeah. They're not boring. No, but isn't it interesting how people get hooked, so to speak, on different methods of going to sleep? But what would be the ideal way? Say a person didn't have sleep apnea and they weren't depressed and they weren't really old and so forth, right?
Right.
Or the young kids that don't do all the stuff that they do. So tell that.
Well, there are a number of things that can be done. After things like sleep apnea and something called restless leg syndrome gets ruled out, and a couple of other things, the thing that they can do is to take a hard look and enter into the world of sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is a system that has been developed that allows people to reset their sleep and wake cycle. Now, we inherit a sleep and wake cycle in ourselves that has a lot to do with color. Okay?
Yeah.
I know that sounds weird, but it turns out that we are programmed to wake up early in the morning when the sky becomes blue. So we can go out. This has come down over the thousands upon thousands of generations. So when the sky is blue, we get up and we go out and do our work. As the afternoon and evening progress, the sky gets progressively darker and darker, and we can't do any more work, so we go inside our cave or our house or whatever have you, and we have dinner and we sit around. In the old days, before Edison came along, we sat around and just went to bed eventually. Because you couldn't sit up and read, you couldn't watch TV, you couldn't look at your computer. And if you notice that your TV, your computer, your cell phone all have a screen that's a lovely light blue, like in Suzanne's studio logo. And it's a lovely light blue, and that actually signals your brain that it's daylight. And it suppresses the release of that famous chemical called melatonin. In so doing, it makes it harder for the person to fall asleep. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating.
That's fascinating, is right. I mean, it's just I'm simplifying it, but this is really a key issue. And we have been programmed this way, our bodies have been programmed this way over generation after generation, and suddenly we introduce nighttime lighting. Now, for example, your computer, your TV is far enough away that you don't get as much light as you would from your computer, because TVs are usually about 6 to 10 feet away from where your eyes are. And your computer is 13 inches. And your cell phone is even closer when you hold it up to your ear. And that blue light turns off our melatonin.
That, I really have never heard that. I bet that's a lot of people that are watching this don't know that either.
Well, most people don't know this.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
But so you've got blue on, so I have to really stay awake, do my job, right?
That's right. That's why I wore blue. That's why I wore blue tonight. Yeah.
So then what? So what do you do?
Okay, then you enter, as I mentioned, into the world of sleep hygiene.
Yes.
See, sleep hygiene says that you need to establish a regular going to bed time, a very good going to bed time, and unless you're a shift worker like a nurse or somebody like that, or doctor, you can go to sleep usually at dark. Most people do during a dark period. And you need to go to sleep about the same time every night and wake up at about the same time every morning. Now, that takes a while to rebuild inside most people, but we'll talk about ways that you can help that happen. One way is that you can't sleep in the morning. You need to get up in the morning. Even if you didn't feel like you slept well that night, you got to get up on time. And even on the weekend, when as a teenager, I learned to sleep as long as I could to make up for my late nights. Even then, you have to get up at dawn or whatever time that you would like. And the most important thing is to get out of your bed and into the sunlight.
And what to the sunlight?
Get into the sunlight.
Get into the sunlight.
That's right. Even exercising, going for a walk, it doesn't make a difference. Well, exercising is good, but you go for a walk in the sunlight with your eyes wide open, no sunglasses, okay?
Really?
Yeah. And then you go to sleep that night. If you want to take a nap in the afternoon, forget about it. Do not take that nap because it'll untire you for going to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? That's one part of sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Would you like me to tell you some more? I mean, of sleep hygiene.
Yeah, more on sleep hygiene.
More on sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Okay. Other things that you can do have a lot to do with when you exercise. So exercising in the morning is good. Exercising in the afternoon and early evening is good. Not exercising just before you go to bed, because that will only stimulate you. That's very healthy for your body. And as much as you can do outdoors during the day. In fact, some people think just going out at lunchtime, just going for a walk in the sunlight, is a great idea too. Sunlight, it really keeps your melatonin suppressed, and then when the dark comes, the melatonin comes out. Fascinating.
Well, boy, I didn't know all of this information was going to be imparted.
Now let me tell you a little more.
Yes,
okay.
Please do.
Another aspect that really works well. Let's say you're lying in bed and you can't fall asleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're up and you just can't go back to sleep. And by the way, many people wake up in the middle of the night and don't even know that they went back to sleep in the morning, but they do go back to sleep very frequently. But let's say you didn't go back to bed. The recommendation generally is you should lie in bed for about 20 minutes and try to meditate or relax or deep breathe. Those work very nicely.
Deep breathing?
Deep breathing, slow deep breathing, particularly putting the emphasis on breathing out.
You could do a demo.
I'll do a demo? Okay.
Yeah,
so some people do, to a count of 4, they breathe in, they hold it for 4, and then they let it out for 8.
Well, would you do it for us?
I'll do it for you, but I wanted to explain what I was doing.
Okay.
So what you do is you go, and you think about, you're already falling asleep on me. But what you think about when that happens is, when you're doing that, is just something very relaxing, calming, something you like lying on a beach or swimming like I do. So I like to swim, even though it's an exercise. It feels very, very relaxing to my body.
And you can envision that.
I can envision that, sure. And you can envision anything you'd like. You can envision a lovely, beautiful scene in the mountains, or a beautiful flower, whatever you'd like.
Okay.
Because there's no magic to that. And then you just, if you can't fall asleep at the end of about 20 minutes, the recommendation is to get up, out of bed, out of the bedroom if possible, and then go to a room and do something with relatively quiet, a low light thing. You could read a book. Just don't read an exciting book, but a book of any kind, or read a recipe, and it doesn't make a difference, but just keep yourself in a low light environment. Some people even wear sunglasses during those times while they're reading.
Really?
Because the sunglasses cut down a lot on blue light. Okay, that comes from any light that we'd have. The major part of it seems to be blue light. And that's what keeps us awake during the daytime, which is very interesting. excuse me, and then there are a number of other things that could be done. And that may just think
some more.
Some more.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very, very good to just close your eyes someplace else, and when you get really tired, to go back into the bedroom again. And I'm trying to remember some of the other ones at the moment.
But the idea, I did hear about if you're having insomnia, that you should not take a nap during the day.
Absolutely not.
That's really a mistake, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Now, some people, that's what they do. They do that, and they have a hard time falling asleep at night. But then they say, well, I'll make up for it during my nap time.
Yeah.
That's hard to do when you're working. It might be okay for retired people to do that, or people who are not working.
But the retired people seem to be the ones that maybe don't have enough stimulation, so that they get tired.
That could be. And people go walking in the morning, particularly very, very helpful for that, older people. You don't have to do it to lose weight. You don't have to do it with that intensity, but just get outdoors and do things.
And what about the amount of hours one should sleep?
That's always debated.
Yeah.
Most people seem to think today that 7 hours is plenty. So they say 6 to 8 hours. Over 8 to 9, if you sleep more than that, that's not. It actually seems to increase mortality. Isn't that interesting? That's what the statistics show. That people who sleep more than 9 hours a night don't live as long as people who do.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good for insomniacs.
It's wonderful
They're going to live
for
forever, or at least seem that way, right?
Yeah.
You're so tired all the time.
There you go.
Yeah. In other words, what you're saying, that the more you sleep, the worse it is for you.
Past a certain point. Past a certain point, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to get back to is that you should, if you really have trouble falling asleep, it's really good to turn off your TV, turn off your computer. Don't do, in addition to the email.
Take the computer to bed? How many people do that?
Oh, a lot of people take that computer to bed.
They're still texting on their phones.
Right?
Yeah.
You get the telephone and you turn it off, you close it, and you put it outside of your reach, unless you're somebody like me who needs it near his reach, because I get called occasionally in the middle of the night.
What do you do about that?
I just reach over and grab my phone and say hello. I'm going to walk out of to another room. Yeah.
And can you go back to sleep?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Depends on what the situation is. If it's an emergency, I will probably just get dressed while I'm getting my clothes on. Get my clothes on while I'm talking to the patient until I meet him in the hospital.
That's terrible to be a doctor.
And that's one of the prices you pay for being a doctor.
Of course. It's as bad as being a pediatrician.
It's worse as a pediatrician, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so go ahead.
And another thing that, stop those things about 2 hours before you fall asleep is a very good idea. And do quiet things that you can do before you go to sleep. I think watching the news at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night has got to be the worst thing for sleep going, because not only do you have the blue light, but you have all these murders. And somebody calls it, some of my friends call it mayhem. That's what it is. That's what they like to give you before you go to bed at night. You don't get the KQED kind of news that, the news hour kind of news. You get how many people got killed in this town tonight, and this accident, and all this mayhem. That makes it really hard to sleep, plus the blue light from your television.
I think that blue light is just really, I knew there was a reason to have you on again. This is the second time you've been on the show.
Thank you.
I like to tell the audience that's because you're so good, you're so knowledgeable. You have a wonderful reputation as a shrink. My dad didn't mind. He was a psychiatrist.
I don't mind it either.
He didn't mind being called a shrink at all.
No,
and I think it's terrible. But it is true.
We call surgeons different things.
Heads. What? Is that how it
you
came
can kid
about?
around. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
They thought you were shrinking heads. Like that movie, Let's Shrink Our Children. You remember?
And you've been in practice, 56 years now?
About 56 years, yeah.
And you're not burned out.
No, I have a lot of fun.
We have 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you some personal questions.
Sure.
Why do you like being a psychiatrist?
Why do I like being a psychiatrist? I particularly like being a child psychiatrist because I find that I've been able in many instances to really make a difference in a child's life that makes a difference as he or she becomes an adult.
Of course.
Secondly, it's challenging. I find I practiced internal medicine and endocrinology for about 5 years before I went into psychiatry, which happened all by happenstance. It's a story in itself. But I found that there was so little known at the time. And when I think back over this 50 some odd years about the changes that have occurred, it's exciting, and I think the changes are going to go on, and genetic differences are going to be found. As right now, for example, we use a word like depression or this or that, and we make it sound like it's we know what we're talking about. But we're going to learn later on there are many, many causes of depression and things like that.
I want to thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to come.
And you are just a joy to
thank you.
Interview.
You're a joy to interview.
Thank you so much, really.
Thank you.
I want to thank our wonderful crew. We have the hottest crew in town. And of course, I want to thank our audience for watching. And this is really from the heart. No blue lights. To my audience, I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.